Hello and welcome to my tutorial. In this tutorial, we are going to look into the zookeeper server and one client communication. We are also going to see the transaction log which is getting generated and also the data logs which gets generated inside the zookeeper server. So let's get started. So this is my zookeeper server. This is a single node server that I'm starting. Meanwhile, when the server starts, let me walk you through the zookeeper configuration file. So this is my zookeeper configuration file. In this configuration file, there are two important things I want to talk about here. The first one is this is the client port using which my client is going to communicate to Zookeeper, and this is the data directory. In this directory, by default, the data and the logs, whatever gets generated, the transaction logs and all, will be stored. This is the location, node 0 data. So this is where the data gets created. So as you can see, my Zookeeper server is up and running, and there's a snapshot which got created. Remember, I talked about a snapshot in the previous tutorials, and in this snapshot, we can actually get the information of every single node which Zookeeper has as of now. So let me show you that. Okay. Okay, so to read this file, basically Zookeeper comes up with its own tool. I'll share the exact command below, which will are the which will are the Java files that you'll have to put in the class path. So I've already set the class path here. So this is the class which is going to read the snapshot file. Let me run this. So here you can see that this is a snapshot of Zookeeper instance as of now. So what this means is basically, so this is the data, sorry, the root directory. As I told you, in case of Zookeeper tree, uh, every single directory can store some or the other values. And similarly, these are the nodes, these are Z nodes. And in every single node, there's some information which is being stored, including the CZX ID, the C time, MZX ID, and also the ephemeral node ID, the data length. There is no data which is stored here, so the data length is 0, and so on. Now, coming back to the server, let me start one Zookeeper client. For just for that example case, I'm going to start a Kafka server. And this Kafka server requires Zookeeper. Okay. So once I start this server, you'll find that there is one log file which will get created here. That log file will be basically the file in which all the transaction related informations will be stored. So let us see what happens after it gets started. Okay, so we can see that there's one log file which got created because this client, after being up and running, it actually starts the communication with the Zookeeper server, and there'll be some kind of heartbeat which will be maintained. And once that is done, so every single step which the Kafka server tries to connect to Zookeeper will be stored inside this log file as a transaction. So we can also read this log file. There's another class implementation to this, and the class implementation here is the log formatter class implementation. Again, Zookeeper comes up with its own implementation to read these log files. So I'm going to share you all the details in the description below. For now, let us see what exactly this log file says. All right. So here we can see that there are steps of there are so many transactions which are happening. So In the first case, you can see there is a request to create a session, and then finally different nodes which are getting created, create broker, broker IDs, topics, and so on. Okay, so if I disconnect this, there'll be another transaction which will get recorded here, and there it will be like a stop session or close session, something like that. Okay, so that's all for this tutorial. In this tutorial, what we have looked into is a single node zookeeper server and how a client communicates to a single node zookeeper server. In the next tutorial, we are going to look into multiple nodes of zookeeper, which is basically we are going to see how we can create an ensemble of zookeeper, or we can say in other words cluster, and how exactly what happens, how lead election takes place, and also what happens when any Kafka client tries to communicate with zookeeper. Till then, thank you very much for watching, and if you like this video, please do subscribe to my channel.